7 Extra, Merrick Elkin in for Cell Signs this week. Just this week, El Paso Matters, a nonprofit, nonpartisan news organization, announced it is hiring, seeking several full-time journalists. Ideal candidates understand the uniqueness of the borderland and are bilingual Spanish-English speakers are preferred. And joining us tonight again are Bob Moore, the CEO of El Paso Matters, and Angela KOCHERGA of El Paso Matters, as well as the news director at public radio station KTEP. Bob, El Paso Matters was recently awarded a $100,000 grant from the Facebook Journalism Project's COVID-19 Local News Relief Fund. You won't find many newsrooms across the country hiring right now. So what exactly will this do for local journalism here in El Paso?
It's sort of an adrenaline shot to the heart right now, which is much needed. And in addition to the Facebook grant, I think it's worth noting that we've also received substantial support from people here in El Paso, as well as some other significant investments from Silicon Valley that I will talk about more in the next couple of weeks, but I can't speak to right now. But all of this money has come together to kind of create an opportunity to be able to expand what we're doing and add some more journalists. And I think especially the money that's coming in from Silicon Valley is really significant because it recognizes the importance of El Paso. I mean, obviously El Paso Matters is the recipient of the grant, but what I've heard repeatedly from these foundations is that the El Paso Juarez region is such a critical part of the world right now, and they recognize the value of local journalism in this region. So it's really a vote of confidence in our community more than anything else. So I'm really happy to be able to use that money to bring in some additional journalists into our community to help more completely tell the stories of what's going on here.
Angela, how are you trying to not only grow the local presence, news presence at KTEP, but also part of what Bob was talking about there, sharing El Paso's story with the rest of the state?
Right. It's so important, Eric. I mean, we often, El Paso and Juarez are at the center of crisis-oriented coverage where people swoop in, do the big story, and leave and don't tell that complete story. And so I think that's why it's so important that nonprofit journalism, what KTEP is doing, collaborating with Bob, but I'm also part of a Texas public radio collaborative that's called the Texas Newsroom, and it's all the public radio stations, large and small, in Texas, and we are sharing stories and we are collaborating on big stories so that we can cover not just the big cities, and El Paso is one of those big cities that are part of Texas, but the rural areas, the more forgotten areas, the stories in between those large places that are all, and along the border are some of those remote stretches that need this important coverage. So El Paso can be a leader in that respect, in border coverage and in covering this corner of West Texas that is so important to the entire state.
Yeah, as we know, we're living in El Paso, the huge gaps between us and the rest of the state and the bigger cities, there's a lot of space in between. Bob, what are some of the other challenges that you've faced in launching El Paso Matters and trying to build an audience really from the ground up? People here obviously have followed your work throughout your career and they know who you are, but you're still starting something from the ground up.
Yeah, and you know, building audiences is a big challenge. So right now we're trying to use social media as much as possible to help get our information out. And some of our stories have done really well in terms of building an audience, but to be able to get a more consistent audience and get an audience that really stretches across El Paso, I think right now our audience is kind of heavily concentrated on the west side, and so we really need to expand that way. So one of the positions I've been able to add is an audience development director who'll help us with that. But just kind of getting our stories in front of people so that they can make an impact. Obviously, you know, we can write stories, produce videos, but if nobody views them, they're not going to have any impact. So we really need to get everything in front of people.
Angela, can you think of many places across the world that are facing a greater challenge when it comes to dealing with this pandemic than El Paso, given our uniqueness of our region and sharing 3 different states, 2 different countries, the border?
Well, I think it is a very unique region, and maybe there are other border regions globally that are seeing this, but we can also look at El Paso as kind of a model. Our public health local authorities have been working regionally for years. They are under great stress now, but with this cooperation is being tested. It's very tough for us too, because we have local, state, and federal governments on both sides of the border, and then two different, state. As Bob was pointing out, there are very big differences in how New Mexico and Texas are kind of approaching the reopening, the testing, all of that. So it really is a unique region, and El Pasoans, borderland residents are kind of caught in the middle, and we're finally seeing some attention paid by the state of Texas. But even though we're now on the same reopening schedule as the rest of the state, we have some real concerns that Bob's been tracking with the numbers for on El Paso Matters about hospitalization. So we all have to keep a close eye on that.
Yeah, Bob, I know you've been tracking the modeling, and obviously it's contingent upon if it were to continue as is. But what is maybe the biggest concern that you have from your vantage point in terms of where we were at the start of May to where we are at the end of May?
I think that the increasing stress we're placing on intensive care units is something that really bears watching. Some of the really basic modeling I'm doing is suggesting that, if the current trends continue, within about 2.5 or 3 weeks, all of the available ICU beds will be taken up, and that's where we get to be in a really stressful situation. So I think the hospitalization numbers, the ICU numbers, and then ultimately the number of people who are dying really bears watching. I think, I hate to say this, but, the way things are going, by this time next week, we'll have had more than 100 people dead in El Paso. And that's just such a stunning thing to even talk about. We have a long, long road ahead, and this virus is so disruptive. And then, coming on the heels of all the other challenges this community's faced in the last couple of years, it's just a really difficult situation.
It has been one heck of a 12-month period here for El Paso. You're watching ABC-7 Extra. Still ahead, a journalist covering the unrest in Minneapolis arrested on live television while delivering a report. We'll ask our panel of experienced journalists what they felt when they saw this unfold.
Claire Chase, a study in character. Chase claims she's pro-Trump, but called Trump an a-hole, bragging she didn't vote for the president. Claire Chase's attacks on Yvette Herrell are called false and absurd by the Republican House leader. As a lobbyist, Chase directed thousands of PAC dollars to Michelle Grisham as her radical agenda destroyed energy jobs. Claire Chase doesn't tell the truth about Trump or anything, and these two just love what she does.
Make New Mexico Great is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Oscar Leaser's Hyundai of El Paso is open. We're operating responsibly and under the guidance of all COVID-19 protocols, and we've got your back. We're offering 0% APR and no payments for 90 days on select new Hyundais. And right now, we have 0% APR for 84 months on new Tucsons, and 0% APR for 72 months on new Elantras, plus 0 payments for 90 days on most new Hyundais, and 3 years included maintenance. This is a tough time, but we're all in this together.
My Oscar, he's such a good boy.
Is your business suffering while you do your part to stop the spread of COVID-19? ABC-7 is here to help. Sign up for your free Open for Biz page at kvia.com. It's a quick and easy way to let the public know when you're open, what changes you're making, and how you're helping your customers through the crisis. Once you're registered, it's easy to update your listing as your plans change. Just go to the coronavirus section at kvia.com and look for the Open for Biz link. When big news breaks,
did you have any funding from an outside group, or is this completely grassroots?
There's nothing like ABC-7 Extra, the Borderlands one-of-a-kind resource for deep dives into our most critical issues.
We're at home not making any money.
Context, depth, perspective from experts, policymakers, and community leaders.
What we don't want to do is open up today and we're back in quarantine in June and July.
ABC-7 Extra, Sunday nights at 10:35, only on ABC-7, where news comes first.
I'm sorry?
You're under arrest.
Okay. Do you mind telling me why I'm under arrest, sir? Why am I under arrest, sir?
That's CNN correspondent being arrested while reporting on the unrest in Minneapolis. The arrest happened while he was live on the air. Omar Jimenez, along with the CNN crew, were all arrested. The CNN crew saying police told the crew they were being detained because they were told to move back and didn't. The crew was released about an hour later. The governor of Minnesota saying there was, quote, absolutely no reason for the journalists' arrests and that he takes full responsibility. Welcome back to ABC-7 Extra. Joining us tonight are Bob Moore and Angela KOCHERGA, two prominent journalists here in the borderland who have covered stories across the country and the globe. And so, Bob and Angela, this was quite stunning to me, as I'm sure it was to you. What was your reaction when you saw this video this morning, especially on Friday morning, especially considering all the places that you've both reported from? Bob, I'll start with you.
The thing that struck me was the incredible grace that Omar showed as he was being arrested and staying calm in a very tense situation. Most people, including most journalists, probably would have reacted much differently under that kind of stress. So just all the praise in the world to him for maintaining his cool and to his crew for maintaining their cool. But to see journalists being arrested in this country is just, it's incredibly disturbing. It obviously was a complete overreaction by the state police in Minnesota. And obviously they're under a lot of stress too. But they're trained to deal with this. And you know, one of the things that's been pointed out is CNN actually had two reporters on the scene there. One was white, one was black. The black reporter got arrested. That is not a good look.
Angela, what about you? When you saw this unfold, what was your reaction, especially considering you've been so many places, covered so many stories and very tense moments at times? What was your reaction when you saw this?
Yeah, well, Eric, it's further escalation against journalists doing their jobs. I mean, out covering the news in the middle of it, showing people what was happening. In addition to arrests and limitations on where we can cover things, especially with the camera having been in television, it's really made it very difficult. And it's also part of this drumbeat that you know, unfortunately, we're hearing about in the public eye from the president calling journalists the enemy of the people. But not just that. You know, there's some training now for journalists, not just how to protect yourself while covering COVID-19 health-wise, but physical protection, because often at protests or at events, there is this horrible backlash from people who are very angry. We've all seen those videos posted online directed at journalists for doing their job. So a worrisome trend. And of course, we've seen what happens in other places like Latin America, where the threats later escalate into, unfortunately, terrible deaths. And Mexico is one of the worst places for journalists, our colleagues, to practice their profession.
Bob, as someone who's trying to hire journalists right now, what is your message to someone, especially if they have any type of hesitation into getting into this field right now? Obviously, the next several months are going to be a very interesting time as we head into a presidential election, also the pandemic going on, and now this. What is your advice to people who are trying to get into the journalism field, or maybe who are potentially thinking about leaving it because of some of the unrest?
I would say stay in the fight. We need good journalists. As Angela said at the outset of the show, especially local journalism is more important than ever right now. It's also more difficult than ever. And, you know, we will have to overcome obstacles, but, you know, obviously, the protests that Angela talked about get a lot of the attention, but the truth is the vast majority of people I come into contact with every day really appreciate the value of local journalism. So it's a difficult job, but it's an incredibly rewarding and an incredibly important job. So for young aspiring journalists out there, stick with it and make your voice heard. And that's especially true for young journalists of color. We need you more than ever.
And Angela, your message to young journalists right now?
I would just say right now, yes, we need you more than ever. Local journalism has never been more important, and we're trying to figure out the model, but storytelling, accountability journalism has to continue in a democracy. And I would say that El Paso is in the perfect place. Our binational, bicultural, bilingual young journalists coming up, and I'm going to give a shout out to Border Zine at the University of Texas at El Paso, UTEP's program for training journalists, Border Zine, where they are out there doing real stories. That's the talent we need, the talent we're developing, and the talent we need to support and ensure that there are those journalism jobs out there to hire this next generation of young reporters.
Well, that's all the time we have. Bob and Angela, I want to thank you both for not only joining us, but also thank you both for the work that you're doing. It is very important, not only to this community, but also to our entire region.
Thank you, Eric.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of ABC 7 Extra. I'm Eric Elkin. You've been watching ABC 7 Extra. Have a great night.